Lie down with Mom. Greetings. It's so great to see you. Clearly, this is not a practice video, and I have a special guest with me today. Her name is Karina. The reason why I'm doing this talking head sit-down video is because people were asking me why I began this channel. So I thought I'd share some background, and therefore you can know how this all came about. Before I get into details, I will be talking about my past a little bit, but also bringing up topics that informed my journey to present day. Therefore, I want to offer a trigger warning. I will be hitting upon sensitive subjects such as infidelity, mental illness, suicide, codependence, love addiction, and trauma symptoms. If any of these topics are uncomfortable or triggering, feel free to skip them. I always break up my videos into chapters, so you can access that in the description below. I'm going to start at the beginning, which is my childhood. I grew up in a financially unstable, unsafe, and neglectful household. My father had a long-term mistress, therefore his presence was not there very often, and this caused my parents' marriage to implode. My poor mother was diagnosed with a mental illness when I was a child, and she wrestled with it for the rest of her life. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and during my childhood and teen years, she tried to commit suicide 3 times. I had to grow up really fast. I was in constant, chaotic, and unstable situations. So when I reflect on my childhood, I always return to the John Bradshaw Melody model. It's a 4-ingredient model that helps a child thrive in life. The first part of that model is giving a child time, spending one-on-one quality time with a child. 2 is giving a child attention. That means paying attention to a child's physical, emotional, and mental state. Knowing their child's inner world and outer world, and being able to help a child along in whatever stage they're at. The 3rd ingredient is giving a child affection, and that means giving a child physical and emotional affection, knowing that a child is loved, or that child is loved, knowing that child is loved, means that the child can go out into the world and make other connections. And so knowing that they're wanted, they have a safe anchor to return to when sometimes the world can be cruel and not as they expect it. The 4th thing and final aspect of that model is giving a child direction. So helping a child develop their moral and ethical compass, as well as even giving a child skills on what they can do and use in life later on. So when I survey those 4 things, I did not get enough of all 4. The impact of my childhood is that I developed survival behaviors. I'm about to list mine, and if you are comfortable and are brave and want to list yours in the comments, I would love to hear them. Here goes mine. I would freeze, So there would be conflict or confrontation, and I would freeze and not know what to do. There were times I had anger and I wanted to express it, and I would freeze and not know how to do that. I would fawn, so I would try to placate to try to keep the peace. I developed hypervigilance, so I would survey the landscape to try to predict what could happen next. I call it a couple of things, so I would have obsessive loops, and then I also call it collating. So I would collate people and things to determine what or who I could trust. I would use fantasy, feel this urge to escape all the time. So I would fantasize about having a different life, being a different person, and of course, literally escaping. I also had fantasies about someone saving me, that I was suffering alone, and that I kept imagining, say, a teacher would notice, like in the movies, and then take me under their wing or bring me home and adopt me. I actually did have fantasies about adoption a lot. But at that time, interestingly enough, I didn't even know that I could be going to a school counselor. I didn't know those kinds of things were available to me at all. There was a lot of isolation because there was a lot of shame at what was happening at home, that I would feel that I had to be secretive. I couldn't share that with anyone. So I would go to school and give this appearance of maybe being a typical kid growing up. However, the chaos that was happening at home, it was like a volcano erupting all the time. So essentially, my friends didn't know what was happening at home. I didn't share that. I had trouble sharing that for many years with people. So, yeah, there was that. I also developed hyper-independence, which is a double-edged sword because truthfully, because of point 4 of the John Bradshaw model, I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to take the bus, how to look for a job, how to tell time. I remember teaching myself how to read. That sounds fantastical, but if you are someone who is recovering from childhood trauma, you probably know what I'm talking about. When I grew up, I took these survival behaviors and I brought them into my adulthood. I'm going to try to draw a picture of the daily life of a person like me who is living with basically untreated trauma. So I can only speak for myself, and I want to qualify that by saying my trauma might manifest differently than yours. The first thing that I would struggle with in daily life was brain fog. So neuroscience backs me up on that. So the prefrontal cortex is designed for rationale. So it allows the brain to think through something logically to a logical end. But with childhood trauma or CPTSD, that becomes damaged over time. And what takes over is the amygdala. And the amygdala is that part of our brain that signals to us to watch, there's something coming, that to be in hypervigilant mode. And so when hypervigilance becomes your standard go-to state of being, the prefrontal cortex degrades. I had trouble making clear decisions. I had trouble even knowing who I was, the things I liked, things I disliked, or even what to do on a daily basis a lot. So, and then the other behaviors would come in. So I would zone out in front of the TV, for example. I would procrastinate a lot. Those are these sort of trickling behaviors because of that base behavior. So I had foggy brain. I could not even necessarily even know what to eat for breakfast the next day. It was a struggle. Another thing that always hit me and was always with me was this pervasive feeling of darkness. That there was just something wrong with me all the time. And I think my baseline was probably misery. I always saw the world as maybe out to get me a little bit, just the trust factor. Again, my trust meter was broken. So I was always on edge. I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I couldn't trust anything or anyone. And then I always had a consistent feeling of shame and guilt and this deep state of unworthiness that I just was never good enough for anything or anyone, and therefore why bother thinking about doing XYZ goal or doing this career or going to school here. So it was just this sense that why should I even exist, which doesn't necessarily correlate to suicidal thoughts, even though I did have suicidal thoughts at times. And of course, bouts of depression. It was just more, why was I even here? Because I had suffered so long for so much, it was hard to kind of reconcile the things I think I'd been through. So that was my daily existence. Another thing that I had a lot of difficulty with was managing my emotions. So I had trouble with anger especially. So anytime I felt angry, I couldn't express it in a constructive way. I would often just feel extremely overwhelmed and just burst into tears. So I couldn't manage that, and I was already an adult. That feeling of always not being right, I did begin to decide maybe I could explore something else. I was always on the knife's edge of money mismanagement. I'm laughing because it's funny, but I just recall that money was always an issue. I again, not taught how to budget anything and not knowing what to do about it, not even realizing, oh, maybe I could go to a budgeting class. These are things that just never occurred to me because I think another aspect of my trauma was learned helplessness. It's never going to get any better, so why bother trying it all or figuring it out? But interestingly enough, there was always something in me that would push forward sometimes. I would run away and go back into my safe cave of isolation, but I would also have the idea to venture out sometimes. And so at this moment in time, I thought maybe I could try therapy. Maybe I could do that. I was definitely at a point where I would struggle with career as well. So I would bounce from job to job. But luckily at this point, I did have a steady job. So I could investigate this. I started cognitive therapy, and it was helpful for a time. I was able to start reasoning things to a degree. However, what I did notice is that it was constantly a loop. I would constantly talk about the same problem over and over again and feel as though I wasn't coming to any solutions. And at that same time, I turned over more rocks. So I think even with my hypervigilance, where I had to fake a lot of things, I was always looking for things as well. I was just always investigating. And I think that helped me a lot in my life. So another thing I discovered was yoga and meditation. It became clear to me that, this could be something that could help me. So I began to take yoga classes, and it was hard. I found it really difficult to follow the directions. And even though eventually I started doing it more and more, I still struggled. With meditation, it was another story, or maybe the same story. I couldn't sit still. I had so much difficulty sitting still because of the collating. I was always collating and surveying and trying to place things and people. On top of obsessive loops, I would have those a lot, thinking in loops of things. So I struggled for a long time with meditation. Eventually, though, it did stick to a large degree, and I became certified. However, the thing with trauma is you can experience highs and lows. So where I was at this point, I would adventure into romantic relationships, but I was either in situations where I would enmesh with someone, be highly codependent, or I would choose a person who would inevitably treat me poorly and leave, which would activate my abandonment issues. I would put myself into uncomfortable and unsafe sexual situations. With my friendships, I still had this shield of isolation, so it was though I couldn't really connect to people very well. With my work situations, I would underpay myself and I couldn't ask for what I deserved. I couldn't set boundaries there. So there were times I would have highs, and then I would also enact destructive behaviors during those highs, whether it would be shopping too much, being in a sexual situation with someone, or smoking, whatever it was I was doing, and then I would have lows, very low lows. I found myself in what I would call a deep pit, and I actually called the darkness the pit often. In this deep pit, I had basically ended a romantic situation that left me in tatters. I was in a work situation where I was constantly underpaying myself. I was in a business situation that I had to end because I couldn't function. And yeah, my friendships again were far away. They didn't always feel very authentic. In general, I'd run out of steam. I had been in survival mode for most of my life. I was very exhausted. Someone had recommended a book to me called Codependent No More. I opened the book, I started reading the text. I then couldn't believe it. My brain lit up. It was reading myself. That was me, this is me, etc. It was enlightening. And then I got a little more brave. But I wasn't doing cognitive therapy. I was also in thousands of dollars of debt and basically living on credit. So I couldn't even pay for a therapist. I started the 12 steps for codependency. It was like having the windows open and the sunlight coming in. I worked with a sponsor. I can't say much more about it other than it was amazing to be in spaces where I didn't feel alone for once. The isolation started to melt away. I started to begin to correlate more because I had difficulty doing that before. It was like opening a map to myself and finally understanding, wow, okay, the reason why I behave like this as an adult and I don't get it is because this happened, for example, when I was 10. And I brought that behavior into today. And I didn't even understand that correlation before. So the brain fog began to lift slightly. I started to have more clear days in my mind. It was a blessing. I began to understand the concept of boundaries. I didn't even know what they were before. I started to practice setting them. I started to speak my truth sometimes. Things did get better. I finished the 12 steps and I believed that's it. I'm healed. It's wonderful. Life's going to be great. You know what's coming next. one of the blessings of the 12 steps for me is I gave myself a future. I was in survival mode so long, I never thought more than 6 months ahead. Recovery allowed me to begin to imagine where I might want to go with my life. Maybe I want to buy a house one day. I want a healthy romantic relationship, a career that I am paid for fairly and that I feel proud of. And maybe I want more connection and authenticity in my friendships. I started to pick away at each of these things. But here's the thing that some people don't tell you about trauma: the rebound. I would go and try to do something. Maybe it was go on a date. And the thing that would happen is my body would, I don't know how else to put it, freak out. It was as though my body could not be in that space with a person and feel calm enough. Although my brain was trying to tell my body, oh, it's fine, you're fine, my body would run away. And then the rest of me would run away. And this would happen over and over again with different situations. I might go a little forward and be sent backwards. It was frustrating. I felt like I could see my future, but it was so distant. It was so far away from me. It was like looking through glass and not being able to participate. That's what it felt like. And often in these situations, I would just revert back to the survival tactic. Oh, this person's displeased with me. Time to fawn. Oh my gosh, I'm going to freeze. Okay, I'm obsessed with this guy. I'm going to go into these loops about why it didn't work out 1,000 times, etc. And I'm just balking because thinking back, it was hard because I felt like a failure. I felt like I couldn't do it. And I was losing hope. I thought, maybe I'm just broken. I'm just like this. I can only go so far with things, even though I want more for myself. And maybe that's all I can do. And as I was about to be resigned to giving up, I found Somatics. The only way to describe it is, instead of just the windows opening with the sunlight coming in, it was like the entire house was flooded with sunlight. At this moment in time, I was more abundant financially. I started working with a somatic therapist. I began to do parts work and meet and talk to these other parts of myself and give them the love and care and tender that they couldn't get before. I saw that somatic tools could help with different emotional and dysregulated states. I thought, oh, there's a tool for anxiety and depression and anger. Anger was one of my Achilles heels. And wow, I couldn't believe it that there are these tools. I began to incorporate those with my yoga practices. And eventually, what started happening is I started to feel safe. Safe, not just for a day or a few hours, but days and months, more consistently. The thing also with trauma is feeling unsafe becomes your normal because that's all you're given. That's all you got to work with. I didn't realize that my normal was starting to destroy me. And another after effect of that, which I didn't mention, is my body was also starting to fall apart. I would have neuromuscular issues, lower back pain. Sometimes I couldn't walk on my feet. And so the somatics also began to change some things physically in me. It was very interesting, to put it mildly. But and also it was just enlightening and eye-opening. So things like eye movements and shaking the body and self-havening, all these different tools that I could use and certain breathing techniques. That was what's incredible about it. And I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is the rebound and feeling as though this is the end point and I can't go further. But somatics taught me that I could go further. I'm talking about nervous system regulation. I was trying to think through my problems. And when I would do that, I would assume that everything else was fine and that I could go along and do this thing that I wanted to do. Maybe meet up with this person. And I would try to do that. So think of it this way. The brain and the body have a bridge. And that bridge is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve begins in the brainstem and goes through the chest into the abdomen. But from a polyvagal standpoint, it's kind of like a bridge that starts at the bottom and goes from the bottom to the top. I was trying to solve my problems from top to bottom. So I would try to drive on the bridge to get my body in line with what I wanted to do, but it was like an alien would take over my body. I felt no control, and I would revert back to those behaviors that used to help me. So I would drive down the bridge, but the bridge is in disrepair. There's no connection between the brain and the body. There is no real safety there. And I would drive and I would see abandoned cars, and then my car that I was driving in would basically stop working, and therefore the rest of my nervous system would then take over and want to protect me and keep me from meeting that person or surveying whether the situation was safe. Another fun way to look at it is Sarah Baldwin, who is a somatic experiencing practitioner. She calls it your SWAT team. So even though, and again, you're trying to think through something, your nervous system comes in and surveys things. Your SWAT team shows up, lands there, and decides this situation is not safe. We're going to take over, and now you're going to fawn, and now you're going to freeze, and now you're going to obsess. And that's what was happening. And I didn't understand that healing for me began with my nervous system, that I needed to give it space to feel safe and to also receive that safety. I didn't even know how to receive it because I didn't even know what safety really felt like because I didn't experience it. Thank goodness that I can now. And I'm so grateful that I found these tools. And that's why I started this channel, was to share these. Not because I'm a spokesperson, but because I want you to know that these tools are accessible. I also want you to know, if you're in it, if you're just starting your journey, that you are not alone. I thought I was an impossible case, that I was a lost cause, that my many layers of trauma were not something that I could even process, let alone get through. So I have hope that if I can try to do this, that you can too. For a long time, I called myself a trauma survivor, which fit. But deep down, I always wanted to thrive. So I hope that we can thrive together. I'm indebted to you for watching. I'm indebted to my teachers. And I'm grateful to you if you were part of my healing journey, which is still in progress. If you got a lot out of this video, I would appreciate a like, a comment. I'd love to hear what you thought of this video, and a subscribe. And obviously, don't forget to hit that notification button so as new videos come out, you receive them. And if you'd like to connect even more, I would love to via email. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is linked below in the description. Sending so much love and understanding your way. We'll see you again. Beautiful Thrivers, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe so I can deliver more of this content to you. Sending lots of light and love, and see you next time.